If you wake up tired, hit a mid-afternoon wall, or struggle to fall asleep at night, you're not alone. Today, we'll unpack why constant tiredness happens and share some practical tips you can try to sleep better and feel more energetic. Welcome to Beyond Wellbeing, brought to you by Allianz. I'm Dr. Oscar Duke, and in this series, we'll explore the science of longevity, the power of mental wellness, and the everyday practices that can add life to your years. Today, we're asking a question so many of us can relate to. Why am I tired all the time? We'll be looking at the biology of sleep, the routines that quietly drain our energy, and simple changes that you can adopt. I'm joined by Dr. Lindsay Browning, chartered psychologist and neuroscientist who holds a doctorate in insomnia from the University of Oxford and is also author of Navigating Sleeplessness. Lindsay, it's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you.
I wondered if we could start by talking about what makes us sleep and how sleep biologically happens.
Sure. So we need to sleep because it's absolutely imperative for us. We repair our bodies, so our bodies need to sleep. And what makes us go to sleep? There are two main kind of processes, two main functions in our body that make us sleep. There is a thing called a homeostatic sleep drive, which is basically it's our body's hunger for sleep or sleep pressure. And it works kind of like your hunger for food. That's a good analogy. So the longer it's been since you last ate something, the more hungry for food you'll be. It's like your hunger builds up and up and up until you eat something. And your sleep pressure, your sleep hunger, this homeostatic sleep drive is the same. So if you had a really great night's sleep, your sleep hunger, your sleep pressure is nil. And then as the day goes by, the longer you've been awake, the more it builds and builds and builds until we have a sleep. So that it's easier for us to fall asleep if we've been awake for a long time, basically. And the other process is our circadian rhythm. And that's our sleep timing issue. And our circadian rhythm, which people might have heard about, your circadian rhythm, and it's to do with your internal 24-hour clock. And basically our bodies know what time it is without needing to look at a clock. And our bodies know when to become hungry, when to produce, to secrete certain hormones, and when to feel sleepy. So in order for us to fall asleep really easily, we need to have been awake for a long time and that sleep pressure have been built up. And also for our body, our circadian rhythm to know it's nighttime. And if our circadian rhythm doesn't know it's nighttime, we might experience something that many people have experienced, jet lag, which is when we just can't fall asleep because our body thinks we should be awake.
The ultimate sleep disaster.
Yeah.
So, in my clinic, I see people all the time who come because they can't sleep. So when somebody first comes to you now as a sleep specialist, what are you looking for? What is the sort of assessment that you go through with them to try and help them get a better night's sleep?
Great. So when people come to see me, there are sort of two main reasons. So one is that they're trying so hard to sleep because they know they can't sleep well and they're so frustrated and anxious and stressed about their poor sleep that's kind of creating this huge, great sleep anxiety and they can't sleep because they're so stressed. Another group of people who aren't getting a great night's sleep, but they don't really know why. And maybe there's a lot more lifestyle changes and people might have heard about good sleep hygiene and things like caffeine and all the sort of lifestyle changes that we could talk about. So it's identifying, why is someone not sleeping? Are they just making a lot of decisions during the day that aren't helping them, like using their phones really late, drinking loads of caffeine, these kinds of things? Or are they so worried about their sleep that they're sort of creating an inability to fall asleep because they're just so stressed? And as well as that, you do have to make sure that their tiredness, their sleeping problem isn't caused by something medical. So that's really important. You've got to make sure that it's not actually they come to see you because they feel really tired, but really they have an iron deficiency or a thyroid issue, or they have sleep apnea or some other medical issue. So we've got to make sure there's nothing else medically going on, because if there is, that needs to be resolved. And if it's simply sleep, then we look at, okay, is it a lifestyle kind of issue or is it a cognitive stress anxiety issue?
So going into those lifestyle issues, I guess, first of all, then, and this term sleep hygiene is bandied around, and I always do my best to kind of help people through. I think a lot of people probably listening as well, they'll think about maybe the obvious things, your caffeine. What are your sort of top tips in that area? Where do you find you get the most bang for your buck with helping people? Yeah,
so caffeine, I've never, ever had a client come and see me who's having 8 cups of coffee a day and they say, "Oh, Dr. Browning, can you help me? I don't know why I can't sleep," because everyone knows that caffeine affects their sleep. It's much more the the unseen issues, which are you're on your phone, you get into bed at 10:30 and you want to go to sleep, but you just reach for your phone. You just, I'll just check a little bit on my phone before I go to bed. I'll just check the news or I'll just check what my friends are up to. And before you know it, it's midnight or it's 1 a.m. And it's those lifestyle issues that you don't realize it, but you're just not falling asleep. You're not giving yourself enough time in bed to sleep. Or what's really common is a sleep timing issue, that people go to bed and get up during the week at a sort of, let's say, at a normal 10:30 p.m. and wake up at 7 a.m. during the working week. And then at the weekend, they'll go to bed at 1 or 2, or they'll be out with their friends or gaming until late. And they'll sleep in, if they don't have kids, until 11, 12, 1, 2. And of course, then come Sunday night, when you want to go to bed at 10:30 so you can wake up for work Monday morning, you're not tired because on Sunday morning, you only woke up at midday, and your sleep pressure, that homeostatic sleep drive, hasn't built, and your circadian rhythm is now confused. And you've, in essence, given yourself a kind of weekend jet lag. And that is something that is really, really common. And people get that really wrong. And they don't understand that consistency, going to bed and waking up, especially at a similar time every single day, as boring as that sounds, is actually one of the best things you can do for your body and for your sleep. It really is.
Yeah. So that consistency is really key.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody wanted to, over a week, say, take a 7-day period and kind of assess their sleep and what they're doing right and wrong, what would be your advice to them? How would they look at that? And what are the key things that they might find that they could change?
So, if you're going to speak to your GP potentially, or do you want to have a look at your sleep, then a sleep diary is really important. So that means just keeping a track of when you got into bed, when you try to go to sleep, because often we'll get into bed at maybe even 9 and put the telly on in our bedroom, but we don't even try to go to sleep until 10:30, 11. And then how long does it take you to fall asleep? Is that a really long time? What time do you wake up in the morning? Were you awake in the night? And what time did you get out of bed? So that's a sort of core. You can have a look at what your sleep really looks like. And then also track what you're doing during the day. So you can look for patterns. Are you going outside during the day? What time of day are you getting natural daylight exposure? When are you finishing caffeine? How much caffeine have you had? Have you had alcohol that day? How much did you have? Have you done any exercise? What did you do right before bed? These kinds of things will give you a bit of a picture and some detective clues. And you can say, oh, actually, you know what? Looking back at this 7-day tracking, I can see that on the days when I had caffeine at 5, 6 p.m., my sleep wasn't that great. Or on the days when I got into bed and didn't watch TV and just tried to go to sleep, I actually got a lot more sleep and I felt better that morning. So it's about looking at an overall week, tracking the kinds of things you're doing during the day, because you might not realize what impact they're having.
I'm so glad you said that, because I too am a big fan of a diary, whether it's for headaches or for sleep or for sort of dietary issues. And again, patients often look at me and sort of yawn and roll their eyes. And it sounds like a tedious thing to do, but actually, if you're serious about solving these problems, it can be really invaluable. Fascinated by exercise and sleep. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that.
So, although we can't say that if you exercise more, you will definitely improve your sleep, but we do know that people who generally exercise more tend to have better sleep. So there is a really strong correlation. So basically, people who exercise tend to be happier, they tend to be healthier, and they tend to have better sleep. Yeah, exercise is great for sleep, but of course, people worry about exercising too close to bedtime. And the reality is, we live in the real world, and I'm a sleep expert, and I could tell everyone what the absolute ideal perfect thing to do is. But the reality is, if you've got kids, you've got jobs, your gym, you can't get to it until 9 p.m. Actually going to the gym and working out might be better for your mental health than worrying about, if I do go to the gym at 9 p.m., that's going to slightly affect my sleep. So if you can choose to not work out vigorously within about 90 minutes of bedtime, that's probably ideal. But if you wanted to do some less intense exercise closer to bedtime, it's unlikely to affect your sleep. And if close to bedtime is the only time you are able to vigorously exercise, then just accept that on that night, your sleep's probably not going to be as brilliant. You might take a little bit longer to fall asleep because the exercise will have released endorphins and your heart rate will be up and your body temperature will be up because you just did loads of exercise. But to know that on balance, doing exercise is better for you than avoiding it. And I see a lot of people who avoid exercise because they think that's so important. for their sleep, but actually, being happier and healthier generally is more important.
Yeah, and making these rules work for you in your life, because otherwise, if you're adding stress, that's going to not help you sleep either, for sure. And then when you do get to bed, talk to me about screens, because we hear so much, don't we, about the blue light frequencies and how they might interact with our sleep patterns, coming off the tablets, the TVs, watching a movie just before you go to bed.
Yeah.
How much evidence is there for that? And how much that probably is coming from the screen itself, and how much from what people are actually doing on those screens?
Oh, that is so brilliant that you asked that question, and you asked it in that way, because it is more complex than just it being a blue light issue. Now, our circadian rhythm controls our sleep timing, like I said. And how it primarily does that is that we secrete a hormone called melatonin at bedtime, basically. And when we have a lot of melatonin in our system, our body knows, it's time to go to sleep. And when we are exposed to, when our eyes see bright light, especially in the higher blue frequency light, it can suppress that melatonin. And that's why we want to, generally speaking, dim the lights in the evening. As in, when we were cavemen and we lived in the natural world, in the evening, the sun would go down, so it would be naturally darker. So that's kind of what we're trying to replicate. So screens, obviously, our phones, our tablets, they produce LED, they produce bright light. And we want to minimize light before bed, really. But saying that using your screens right before bed is going to destroy your sleep isn't the full picture if you're blaming it entirely on the blue light, because yes, the light does suppress melatonin a little bit, but how many of us have fallen asleep whilst watching TV in the evening? I mean, loads of us. We'll be
it's not switching
on the
sleep
sofa.
off, is it?
Yeah, exactly. The reason that screens before bed are so damaging, I think the primary problem is that we don't stop using them. That's the key. When we are on our phone in bed and we're using our screens, we tend to be watching, little 90-second, 30-second YouTube clips or TikTok or whatever it is. And we're scrolling, and we don't stop. We meant to go to bed at 10:30, but we are scrolling. And then before we know it, an hour, 2 hours have gone by, and we were just absorbed in the dopamine hit of these tiny videos.
There's a black hole of dopamine hits coming right there.
And that's why using your screens before bed can be especially so damaging, because we forget to go to bed. Basically, it's sleep procrastination. We are choosing this sort of short-term happiness from our phones instead of the long-term, we're going to be so much happier tomorrow if we actually went to bed on time, woke up feeling refreshed.
Sometimes when people are in that sort of space, they're trying to get off to sleep. They say, I'm so tired, but there's that sort of wired and tired. I'm overactive in my brain in some way. What's the sort of advice for them? What can they try?
So that's absolutely textbook insomnia. So when someone has insomnia, and insomnia doesn't mean you can't sleep at all. It means you have a significant problem falling asleep or staying asleep. When someone has insomnia, they tend to be really stressed and anxious that they're not getting a good night's sleep. And the night before, maybe they had only 2 or 3 hours sleep. And then when they go to bed, they are super stressed because they know, well, I didn't get much sleep last night. I have to sleep tonight. So they're physically tired. They are physically exhausted, but their brain is wired, is super alert, because their brain is in panic mode, because it's like, oh my goodness, we have to sleep. Otherwise I won't be able to cope tomorrow. And there's a huge difference between being tired and being sleepy. And that's what, just imagine for a second, if you were in bed and you're really calm and tired and everything was fine, and suddenly there was a wild animal came into your bedroom. Like, you would be wide awake at that moment, because
fight or flight is
exactly.
There. Yeah.
So when people say that they're tired but wired, it's that the tired is a physical tiredness, they are, but they're wired because their body, their mental state is fight or flight. Whether that's because they're stressed about something that's happening tomorrow, or they're stressed about their sleep, which is insomnia, really.
Imagine then we do get off to sleep. Hopefully, we all need some of that. And then you wake up in the middle of the night. You look at the alarm clock. Everything's wired again. There's that frustration kicking in. What's happening during that time? Is that a bad thing? Is that dangerous and detrimental to our sleep? And what can we do to try and prevent that sort of panic in the middle of the night?
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is please, please, please do not have a clock that you can see from your bed.
No clock.
No clock that you can see.
Okay.
I want you to set an alarm for the morning for sure, but just turn it away from you. Or if it's your phone, put it face down or put it far away from you. Because as soon as we wake up in the night, and what's really key is that everybody wakes up in the night. Waking up in the night is normal. In fact, good normal sleepers, we all wake up just for a tiny bit of time throughout the night. Just we become slightly aware kind of between sleep cycles, and that's normal. But if we wake up enough to realize that we are awake and we check the time, then all that's going to do is to stress you more. Because once you've seen the time, you think, oh no, it's 2:57 again. Why do I always wake up at this exact time? And you start worrying, or you start calculating, well, how much sleep have I had? If I fall asleep right now, how much sleep will I be able to get by the morning? And you're making yourself more alert and more stressed.
It's that classic waiting for a flight, or isn't it? You're always up. Yeah,
absolutely. So what I would say is ensure you have an alarm that is going to wake you up. Because if you don't, you're going to have to check the time because you think, oh my goodness, I don't want to miss my alarm. So make sure you have a really reliable alarm clock. And then if you wake up in the night, you don't need to know what time it was. It might be 2 a.m. It might be 2 minutes to your alarm. You don't need to know. All you have to do is go, oh, I'm awake. Okay, let's see if I can go back to sleep again. And maybe try some relaxation exercises. There are loads that we could discuss or you could look up. There are loads of things you can do just in bed to gently help yourself calm down and hopefully drift back off to sleep again. But as soon as you check the time, you're making it harder for you to go back to sleep again.
And so you try some of your relaxation, still not working.
Yep.
Dr. Browning, I still can't sleep.
Yeah. What do we do?
I keep trying?
No.
What do I do then?
So really important is that the idea of staying in bed, trying to force sleep. If you've been in bed for what I say is a sort of a gut feel of about 20 minutes, say. If you've been in bed and you feel like you've been awake for an amount of time that is starting to feel frustrating, you're like, oh, I did some slow deep breathing, or I imagine myself on a relaxing beach, but I just can't go back to sleep again. If you just stay in bed trying to force yourself to go to sleep, you are just getting yourself more wound up, more anxious. And when we are wound up and when we are anxious, we don't sleep. So get up out of bed for a little bit. This is really key. Ideally, leave your bedroom. If you can't leave your bedroom, then at very least sit up in bed and go and do something like read a book, do a jigsaw, paint a picture, like just do something that is nice, that's distracting, that will give you a sense of, okay, I wasn't sleeping, that was annoying, but I'll do something else. And then we can go back to bed again and try again. I want people to think of it like a reset, because most people, when they're not sleeping, they will just stay in bed and they won't get up because they think, well, if I get up, then I won't be able to sleep, or I'll wake myself up. But of course, if you're in bed not sleeping, being frustrated, you're already awake. Like, why are you thinking I'll wake myself up? You're already awake. So if you're awake, get up out of bed and be awake for a bit. And by getting up out of bed and doing something else like reading or a jigsaw or something, whatever you find pleasant, for a little bit, then coming back, it's like giving yourself a reset. You're just giving yourself a break because it's not happening. That's annoying. Okay. And then we reset, fresh start, back in bed, and you're much more likely to go back to sleep again at that point.
Moving away from that kind of ever-descending spiral of despair that can happen. A lot of people will listen and think there are so many things they can change. Is there one particular quick win that you have for people if they want you sort of the minimum effort but with the maximum return? In all your experience, is there one thing that you would say, if this was going to be the single item that you tried to change, I think this would be the best? I think if you're somebody who isn't really getting enough sleep, and it's because you're just not going to bed at the right time, you're getting into bed and you're just not switching off, and in your heart of hearts, honestly, that it's because you've got your phone next to the bed and you've just been scrolling too late, we've been watching stuff on the phone too late. And that is, in reality, probably the most common reason people don't get enough sleep is because they're just on their phones too late. Then I would say, give yourself a bedtime, a dedicated, okay, I plan to go to sleep, or I plan to go to bed at 10:30, at 11, at 10, and put your phone down at that point, and you do not pick it up again until your alarm goes off, until the morning. So you're not tempted to, well, I gave myself 10, 15 minutes in bed trying to sleep and I couldn't, so
I'll reach my phone. I'll just check something because
quick email.
Yeah. And that's just going to make everything so much worse. So I would say that is really key. That would be my absolute top tip for most people who are not sleeping well.
So the phone is locked somewhere where you can hear it when it wakes you up. But other than that, it's not to be touched.
Yes.
So with all those top tips in mind, we've got a little case study for you to listen to, if you don't mind, and give us some of your expert opinion as well. We've invited a colleague with a really busy home and work life to try a micro experiment to understand their sleep a little bit better. No devices, just some simple steps. So a couple of things. Firstly, 2 hours before bed, we asked them to do a 2-minute brain dump. So just offloading all of their thoughts, tasks, writing them down, but a little bit of journaling just for 2 minutes. And then a wind down. So 10 minutes of light stretching and a little bit of sort of deep breathing, the 4-6 breathing. So you breathe in for 4 seconds and then breathe out for 6 seconds. So shall we hear how our colleague Michael got on?
Amazing.
My normal bedtime routine would be that I'm watching TV, read newspaper, or do some online courses for personal education, but no specific routine as such. So therefore, I'm quite curious to see and learn if the 2 routines I'm planning to do today are making a difference. And what I plan to do is, on the one side, doing some stretching and writing down my to-do list. So to kind of put all the stuff still having in mind down to a paper, which might influence my sleep.
Good morning. So quick message after waking up. Feeling good this morning. I think energy level is a 9 out of a 10. Was there a real difference this night? Hard to say after doing it one night. So wanted to try again this night the same things and see if that has a bit of a longer effect. But overall, doing really well, feeling good.
All right, it's me again. Second night. Instead of going from sofa and television directly to bed, going to take 2 exercises, and one will be again the brain dumping, and the second one will be also, as similar to yesterday, some stretching. Felt quite good this morning, so we'll give it a try tonight as well. And after doing, we'll give you another brief update.
Quick reflection of the night. So fall asleep quite well, slept through. So the night was really good as the night before. And also this morning feeling quite energized.
So Lindsay, what were your thoughts? Michael's attempts and tips and tricks that he was trying.
Perfect. So I absolutely, as part of my sort of recommendations when someone comes to see me when they're not sleeping well, is to implement a brain dump, a worry time before bed. Because if we, during the day, most of us, we're just too busy. We fill our day with things. We're working, we're dealing with our kids, we're socializing, we're just busy. And then when we get into bed, often that's the first time we've had the whole day for our brains to think about anything. And we'll go straight to, oh my goodness, I haven't done this today. I've got to do that tomorrow, or worrying about whether we should have done something else today. So giving yourself an explicit time to write down your to-do list for the tomorrow or what's worrying you is fantastic. I think the gentleman on the piece just now said that he did it right before bed, which is okay, but I would prefer that you do it a couple of hours before bed.
Right.
Because doing it at all is great, but if you did it a couple of hours before bed instead of right before bed, it means that you're not bringing all that stuff to mind directly before you go to sleep. Because sometimes we might find if you start worrying and writing it down, yes, you'll get it out of your head, but it might all be a bit too fresh. And then you lie down and it's still there. So if we make it sort of a couple of hours before bed, then that can kind of like settle, and we've addressed it, got it out of our mind to leave our mind clearer at night, but it not be too fresh. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It always reminds me of Harry Potter when Dumbledore can take his thoughts out of his and put them into that sort of wonderful bowl.
That's
you can
perfect.
just offload those thoughts and get that mental list down on paper, maybe perhaps even away from your phone.
Yeah. So I think realistically, if you're a person who's younger than myself, then the idea of getting a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen might seem a bit crazy. So doing it on your iPad or your phone is fine.
Going to be on the phone, isn't it? Yeah, we're going to accept that one.
If you are my age or older, then a piece of paper and a pen would be great.
Would be lovely. Maybe a diary, a thought dump diary.
And then he did the stretching before bed, and that's fantastic because we don't need to have a really extended wind down time before bed. We don't need to stop doing anything of interest hours before bed, but giving yourself, I think he said like 10, 15 minutes before bed to do something relaxing and calming is a great idea. It really is for everybody. Because, well, firstly, if we do something similar and consistent before bed every night, your brain starts to associate, this activity happens, and then we go to bed. And it's psychologically, you start to associate that with sleep, making falling asleep maybe a bit easier. If people have had kids, you will know that we have a bedtime routine of bath, milk, story, bed that we do consistently every night. We might use the same bubble bath. We might use the same words. And everyone knows, baby and yourself included, that sleep is coming soon. And then when we're an adult, we often don't do that anymore. So if we do something before bed that is relaxing and consistent, it can help to signify psychologically that sleep is coming. Stretching is a fantastic thing to do because it physically is going to relax your body as well as being that sort of trigger. But if you don't want to do stretching, that's not really for you, that's okay. Choose something else, like read a book, listen to some nice music, literally whatever you want to do that you will find calming and relaxing. If you do that consistently before bed, it should really help you to feel in a better mental state, ready for sleep, that isn't anxious and stressed, but also be that signal of consistency before bed.
So your choice, something you enjoy, but have a routine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Michael was reporting to us each morning how he felt, which is, I think, really important from talking to you a little bit earlier as well about, how you feel you are when you wake up from your sleep. So many people now are measuring that using tech of all sorts of different wearables, sorts at nighttime. What are your thoughts on that measuring of your sleep score, say?
Sure. So it depends why you're using it. So if you're someone who has been neglecting their sleep, like you've been going to bed whenever, getting up whenever, and you're like, I probably need to have a look at what I'm doing with my sleep and maybe track it a bit and try and improve it. Then using a sleep tracker of whatever kind you choose can be a helpful tool to help you do that. However, if you are using that sleep tracker to identify exactly what your sleep score is and using that as more important than how you feel during the day, then I start to get worried because the sleep trackers, they're not perfect. And I've had clients who come to see me who've literally said, well, I woke up, I had what I thought was a great night's sleep. I felt really good, but my sleep tracker told me that my sleep score was only 65. So it wasn't a good night's sleep. And suddenly,
who's deciding here?
Yeah. The sleep trackers, they don't know everything. They can get it wrong. So I always tell my clients, I want to know how you think you slept, how you feel, and how you feel during the day, much more than what an arbitrary piece of technology says happened. So yeah, technology isn't inherently evil and bad, but it's how you use it that's important.
And then we've talked about sort of fitting this into people's lifestyle. There are, I guess, certain circumstances which make sleep potentially much more difficult. You're thinking about, somebody who might be, for example, doing night shifts. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah. So although if we are in charge of our lives, then having a fairly consistent, bedtime, wake time, 7 days per week is better for our health, for sure. But if you are a doctor, if you are someone who works repairing electricity pylons, in the middle of the night, all sorts of careers, pilots, we can't do that. Or you're a parent who has a newborn and is waking up throughout the night. There are times in our life or lifestyle choices like our job that mean that we can't get this idea of perfect sleep, in which case we have to make the best of it. So when we're doing shifts, what's really important is to remember that light exposure is key. So we want to get lots of bright light, especially first thing in the morning, and avoid bright light towards bedtime. Now, that means if your shifts are a different time, we're talking about your morning. So if your morning happens to be 7 p.m., then you want to get lots of bright light at your morning time. And when you finish that night shift, say, and you're coming home, you want to try to avoid light. And especially with doctors, nurses, those kinds of, or police, those kind of shifts, often the shift will end as morning is starting. So of course, when you're coming home from work, the sun is rising. And actually, when you come home, in that journey home, you'll be exposed to lots of natural daylight, which can fool your body into thinking, we don't want to go to sleep now because it's clearly daytime. So what you could consider is wearing sunglasses on the way home, but be mindful, really, really, really careful of your personal safety, because if you are driving home after a night shift, you're going to be tired. And we might want to not wear sunglasses if that's going to make you extra tired. So if you're taking public transport home, which is ideal after a night shift, then wear sunglasses. If you're driving home, maybe don't, but once you get home, close the curtains. I know that it's morning, but it's not morning for you.
Get that circadian rhythm in line with you. Get that melatonin rising again.
Exactly. So for you, wear sunglasses at home, close the curtains. And if you're sleeping during the daytime, you're going to have to do practical things to help, like earplugs. Maybe if your curtains might not be blackout, so use an eye mask, things that will help you to sleep when the world outside is noisy and bright. And what's really, really key is having like I mentioned before, a pre-bedtime routine. And if you're sleeping at different times, this sort of thing that you do before bed is even more important. Maybe the thing you do before bed is the light stretching. Which case, whenever you're going to go to sleep, if you do the light stretching before you go to sleep, your body knows, sleep is coming next, whether that's at 10 p.m. or at 3 p.m. or at 6 a.m. So doing something consistent before bed can be really, really helpful when you're working shifts.
And you mentioned pilots, travel, jet lag.
Yeah.
Similar tips for jet lag when you're arriving somewhere? Would that be, I guess, similar to doing a night shift?
Yeah. So with jet lag, what you can do is to pre-plan. So if you're going on holiday somewhere or you're traveling for work, and when you get to your destination, you need to be on pretty quickly. And if you're going on holiday, you kind of want to be in the new time zone so you can enjoy it really well. So what you can do is in a few days before you travel, start moving your body to the new time zone. So that means if you're traveling east, then start going to bed a little bit earlier and waking up a little bit earlier in the days leading up to travel, so that when you get to your destination, you're already partly there. And light exposure. So when you get to your destination, making sure you get lots of bright light earlier in the day, you avoid light later in the day, and you adjust your meal times as well. Because meal timing, when we eat breakfast, lunch and dinner, our circadian rhythm is in charge of that as well. And that can affect our circadian rhythm too.
We've talked, I guess, a lot about the lifestyle elements, the insomnia, these sort of different circumstances. At what point would you be suggesting to your clients that they do need to see a clinician, a medical professional to ascertain that there's nothing else going on?
So if you're someone who is struggling with poor sleep and you're feeling really fatigued during the day, first of all, have a look at how much sleep you're getting. Because if you feel really, really tired during the day, but you're only sleeping for 6 hours a night, then it's probably just an issue that you need a bit more sleep. But if you are sleeping for a reasonable amount of time and you're still feeling tired during the day, that's a sign that maybe your sleep quality isn't good enough. And it could be something like I mentioned, a deficiency like an iron deficiency or a thyroid issue, or sleep apnea, which is really, really commonly undiagnosed. And I'm sure you know even more than I do all about sleep apnea, having worked in that field. But sleep apnea means that people repeatedly stop breathing during the night, which means their sleep quality is destroyed because they frequently wake up. It could be 100, 200 times during the night, meaning their sleep is so fragmented, they probably won't even realize they've woken up for any of these awakenings. They'll think they slept fine, but they really didn't. So if you have that chronic fatigue during the day, despite the fact you think you're getting enough sleep, please speak to a medical professional to investigate what is going on, because no amount of yoga before bed or sleepy teas or avoiding phones is going to fix that issue. It really needs to be investigated, identified, and the appropriate treatment given.
When patients have tried all of these strategies, they're still really struggling with their sleep, they're doing all the right things, they're getting frustrated by it. One of the things that I sometimes refer them for is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. For people who don't know what that is, can you give us a really sort of brief summary of what the principle of that happens to be?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Well, lots of people with insomnia, they maybe don't want to speak to their doctor because they worry if they go to the GP, they'll just get prescribed sleeping medication. But the reality is CBTI is a non-pharmacological treatment for insomnia. And it works by looking at the behaviors people are currently doing with their sleep, looking at their bedtime, their wake time, and making sure that they do the right things before bed, explaining to them what those are, tell them a good bedtime, a good wake up time, what to do when they can't sleep. And it's just amazing at helping people to undo the anxiety that often people have about insomnia, and that they're so stressed about not sleeping well enough that means they don't sleep. So CBTI is incredibly effective. And I would really urge anyone who's really struggling with their sleep to seek that treatment.
Rather than a sleeping tablet.
It's a way of, sleeping tablets, I think, are a little bit like antidepressants in that sometimes antidepressants, you need those to help get you in a mental place, so that you can do therapy or change things in your life that are making you unhappy. CBTI is like the therapy that helps you to fix your sleep, and sleeping pills more just, they make you fall asleep, but you become tolerant to them very quickly, and they don't really fix why you're not sleeping, whereas CBTI fixes why you're not sleeping and helps you to overcome that.
So if you're really struggling and serious about finding a solution, then CBTI may be for you.
Absolutely.
Lindsay, I could listen to you all day, but the circadian rhythms are against us, I think, and it will soon be bedtime for us too. So Dr. Lindsay Browning, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing all of your expertise, and hopefully some really valuable advice there for all of the listeners. Dr. Lindsay Browning, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lindsay was packed with useful information, but I think the key takeaways really were to stick to a helpful and healthy sleep routine. Try to avoid those lie-ins, set a time for going to bed and waking up, and stick to it, particularly if you're struggling with your sleep. I loved her idea of the brain dump. Get that journaling, get the tasks out onto a piece of paper, onto your phone if they need to be, before you put your phone away for the night, to let your brain relax and really settle into the sleep process. And finally, when you wake up in the morning, trust yourself. If you've slept well, don't let your phone or obsessing over a score or a sleep score or your heart rate tell you otherwise. If you feel refreshed, then it's likely you've had a great night's sleep. That's it for this episode of Beyond Wellbeing. If the tips and strategies discussed today have been helpful, then please do share them with a friend who might also need a boost. Follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Until next time, sleep well.